We've all watched those grand victory feasts brought to life on screen. The overflowing horns of mead, the thunderous laughter echoing through smoke-filled halls, and the treasures shimmering beneath the torchlight. But when the fires dim and the last song fades into silence, that's when the real story begins. A story few ever speak of. It's the tale of noble women, queens, princesses, and daughters of proud chieftains, whose worlds had just been swallowed by flame and steel. Their fates weren't tragic coincidences or forgotten side notes of war. They were strategy, cold, deliberate, and executed with chilling precision. This isn't a story of rescue. It isn't one of romance or redemption. It's about what happened after the victory songs stopped, when the true cost of conquest was measured not in gold, but in flesh and silence. 7 stories, 7 forgotten fates, each one a reminder that behind every empire's triumph, someone else's world was burning. Before we begin, tell me, what do you think matters more in war? Victory, or what's left behind after it? If you value deeply researched, authentically told history, make sure you're subscribed. It's how we keep these buried truths alive and share them with the world once more. Now, let's return to the story. Number 1. The Women of Ayr on the Irish coast. The entry in the Annals of Ulster is brief, frighteningly so. Written like a ledger of loss, it notes that in the year 821, Ayr was ravaged by the heathens, and many women were carried away into captivity. Ayr, known today as Howth, stood like a guardian on a peninsula at the northern gate of Dublin Bay. Its position made it a vital stronghold, and that raid was no random act of plunder. It was a calculated strike, a seizure of resources, and in the 9th century the most valuable resource of all was human. Those women, stripped of family, title, and identity in a single violent moment, were reclassified under Norse law as thralls, the lowest rung of their world. They became property rather than people. Their descent into bondage began on the decks of Viking longships, packed shoulder to shoulder as human cargo beneath the spray of the Atlantic. The journey itself was a cruel test of endurance. Only the strongest survived the cold, sickness, and hunger. Their likely destination, the rising Viking settlement of Dyflin, now Dublin, a city that would soon become one of the largest slave markets in all of Western Europe. There they were examined, priced, and sold. A young, healthy woman might fetch 12 to 20 ounces of silver, the equivalent of an entire farm's annual yield. Some were taken by Norse settlers within Ireland. Others were sent farther north to Hedeby in Denmark or Birka in Sweden, while many were trafficked through the rivers of the Rus into the vast slave systems of Byzantium and the Abbasid Caliphate. Their noble skills, weaving, healing, the arts of governance, no longer marked their status, only their market value. The annals record no names. They were reduced to entries, confiscated, catalogued, and erased, their voices absorbed into the economy of empire. Number 2. Melkorka, daughter of Muirchertach. Mid-10th century Ireland to Iceland. From the fragments of the Laxdæla saga, written 2 centuries later, we recover one name among thousands. Melkorka, daughter of an Irish king, Muirchertach. Around the year 956, her world was torn apart by a Viking raid. Taken from her homeland, she was shipped to Norway and placed for sale in a bustling market square. There she caught the attention of Höskuldr Dalakolsson, a wealthy Icelander on royal business under King Haakon of Norway. Struck by her quiet dignity, he asked the trader for her name. The merchant, a coarse man named Gilly, claimed not to know. Höskuldr paid 3 marks of silver, an immense sum. 1 mark equaled 8 ounces, so he paid 24 ounces total, enough to buy 3 prime milk cows. With that payment, he also purchased silence. During the voyage to Iceland, Melkorka spoke not a single word. In the years that followed, she lived in his household as a concubine, a frilla, and bore him a son named Olaf. To all, even to Höskuldr himself, she seemed mute. But that silence was her last defense, a fragile barrier to preserve the fragments of herself in a world that had stolen everything else. Her truth emerged by accident. One day, Hoskuldr passed by a stream and overheard her softly speaking Gaelic to her son, teaching him her native tongue. The saga preserves that moment, her voice at last breaking through the silence. She told the boy his grandfather was Muirchertach, king of the Irish. Confronted, she revealed who she truly was. Her position in the household improved, but freedom never came. Melkorka remained in Iceland until her death. A princess in exile, her royal lineage remembered only because her son would one day reclaim it. That son, Olaf the Peacock, grew into a chieftain renowned for his brilliance and splendor. He returned to Ireland as a man of wealth, met his royal grandfather, and was acknowledged as kin. But Melkorka never saw her homeland again. She died far from the kingdom that was her birthright, bought, silenced, revealed, and forgotten. Number 3. The Abbess of Coldingham, 870 AD, Northumbria, Scotland. In the autumn of 870, the great heathen army, the same force that had tormented England for years, marched north. At its head were the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, among them Ivar the Boneless and Halfdan Ragnarsson. Their next target was the monastery of Coldingham, a twin community of monks and nuns perched high above the North Sea on a windswept cliff. The abbess, remembered in later chronicles as Ebb the Younger, knew exactly what was coming. Raids on monasteries were infamous not only for their plunder but for the atrocities inflicted upon the women within. For Ebb and her sisters, what awaited them was a fate even crueler than death itself. A desecration so deep that, in their devout eyes, it stained not just the flesh, but the soul. As the Viking host drew near, Ebb gathered her frightened community inside the chapter house. The 13th century chronicler Matthew Paris, in his Florus Historiarum, leaves little to the imagination. He writes that Ebb seized a razor, and before all present, drew it across her own face, slicing off her nose and upper lip until her features became a crimson ruin. Then, with an iron calm, she turned to her sisters and commanded, "Make yourselves a terror to the lust of these barbarians." And one by one the nuns obeyed. Each took the blade to her own skin, mutilating herself until the chamber was filled with women whose wounds made them unrecognizable. No longer objects of beauty, but defiant spirits clothed in pain. So when the Norse warriors finally battered down Coldingham's defenses and stormed through the monastery gates, they did not find trembling victims waiting to be violated. Instead, they met a silent, unbroken circle of women who had already chosen their destiny. Enraged that their prize had been snatched away so deliberately, the invaders unleashed their fury. They barred the doors, heaped timber against the stone walls, and set the entire house ablaze. The flames swallowed the monastery, consuming Ebb and every sister within it. Their decision had never been between life and death. It was between two different kinds of endings, and they chose the fire. Their bones fused with ash and earth, buried in the cliffside where their convent once stood, burned, buried, but never broken. If you value carefully researched stories like this, consider subscribing. It's the most direct way to support this work. And let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. This account, and many others like it, draws from sources such as the Chronicles of Matthew Paris, supported by archaeological research on Viking Age settlements. Now, let's return to the record. Number 4. The Women of Canterbury, 1011 AD, the heart of Kent, England. For nearly 3 relentless years, a vast Danish force under Thorkel, the Tall, ravaged southern England. King Athelred, remembered by later generations as the Unready, had tried to buy peace with heavy tributes of silver, the infamous Danegeld, but each payment only fed the flames. The more England paid, the bolder the invaders became. By September of 1011, their eyes turned toward Canterbury, England's holiest city, the seat of its archbishop, and the very heart of its spiritual power. For 20 harrowing days, the people of Canterbury held out. The Anglo-Saxon chronicle speaks of a brave and desperate defense. But as with many sieges, betrayal opened the gates. A man named Elmer, whose life had once been spared by Archbishop Elfhe himself, turned traitor. He led the Danes into the city. What followed was not conquest, it was carnage. The invaders flooded through Canterbury streets, capturing its leaders in a single, devastating blow. Archbishop Elfhe, Elfgar the King's Reeve, Leofruna the Abbess of St. Mildred's, and Godwine, Bishop of Rochester. The Vikings seized both the sacred and the powerful in one sweep, then unleashed their wrath upon the rest. Christ Church, the great cathedral, was desecrated and stripped bare. Fires devoured homes. The city's population was butchered in the streets. Yet not all were slain. Some, particularly noble women, were deemed too valuable to kill. Abbess Leofruna and Elfgar's household were spared, kept alive as human currency in a brutal game of negotiation. For months, these captives lived in limbo, their fates shifting with the tempers of men who drank from silver cups and decided lives on a whim. Archbishop Elfhe, revered for his courage, refused to allow the church's treasures to be used for his ransom. He declared that no silver consecrated to God should purchase his freedom. His captors, maddened by defiance, turned on him. At a drunken feast in Greenwich, they mocked him with bones from their meal before one of them struck him down with an axe. His martyrdom was violent and immediate. The women, however, remained pawns in a different game. A year later, England struck a deal, a staggering £48,000 of silver to buy the withdrawal of Thorkel's army. That ransom likely included the freedom of Canterbury's captured women. Their deliverance didn't come through mercy or divine intervention. It was purchased, measured in silver, weighed in scales, their lives reduced to numbers in a cold arithmetic of war and politics. For the women of Canterbury, survival itself became a transaction, a reminder that even freedom in those days came with a price. Number 5. The Captives of Dumbarton Rock, 870 AD. The Kingdom of Strathclyde, Scotland. While the great heathen army under Halfdan and Ivar the Boneless swept across the east, burning monasteries and leaving ruin in its wake, another Viking coalition advanced from the west. At its head stood Amlabe the White, Norse king of Dublin, alongside his fierce ally Ivar. Their ambition was audacious, to conquer the mighty stronghold of Alcluith, today known as Dumbarton Rock, the heart of the Strathclyde Britons. The fortress itself was legendary, carved from volcanic stone and rising like a natural citadel above the River Clyde. For 4 relentless months, its defenders resisted the siege. The cliffs were too steep to climb, the walls too high to breach, so the invaders turned to patience and strategy. They surrounded the stronghold and, with ruthless precision, severed its lifeline, the water supply. For 12 unbearable days, the defenders endured thirst so great that desperation eclipsed courage. When the well inside Dumbarton finally ran dry, the fortress that no army could conquer was undone by the absence of water. The chronicles record what followed as one of the most staggering moments of the Viking Age. The victorious Norse stripped the fortress bare, of gold, of weapons, and of people. The Annals of Ulster describe the aftermath as one of the largest mass enslavements in early medieval Britain. Amlabe and Ivar remained through the winter, their ships anchored on the Clyde, loading their human cargo. When spring came, they sailed for Dublin, a fleet of 200 ships carrying more than plunder. On board were men, women, and children, the living spoils of war. The annals note that they returned with a great prey of men, Angles, Britons, and Picts alike. Among those captives was Arthgal, king of Strathclyde, taken with his family, his wife and the noblewomen of his court, once the embodiment of power and grace, now marched in chains, stripped of title, rank, and humanity. Arthgal himself was later executed in Dublin at Amlabe's command. His queen and the other women fared no better. They were herded into Dublin's slave markets, assessed like livestock, and sold to the highest bidder. No royal blood could protect them. Their lineage meant nothing beneath the weight of iron shackles. Their only remaining value lay in what a buyer was willing to pay. This single event revealed the cold efficiency of Viking slavery, that raids were never just about silver or treasure. Human lives were the true prize. The siege of Dumbarton wasn't an accident of war, but a calculated act of commerce, a brutal, methodical supply chain for the markets of the north. The noble women of Strathclyde, once honored as queens and mothers of their people, were transformed into nameless entries in ledgers, thirsted, surrendered, and sold across the sea. Number 6. The wives of the settlers, late 9th century Iceland. The Landnámabók, or Book of Settlements, remains one of the primary sources chronicling the early colonization of Iceland. Its pages speak of daring explorers seeking freedom and opportunity, yet buried between its lines is a darker truth. This new world was built upon captivity. The colonization of Iceland was not merely a story of adventure. It was also one of abduction and forced migration, of women taken by violence and carried into exile. The saga of Ingemund the Old, a powerful Norwegian chieftain, exposes this reality. Before settling in Iceland, Ingemund's men, including his foster brothers, raided the coasts of Ireland. The Landnámabók records this bluntly, without embellishment. The raiders returned with captives. Women ceased to serve as wives and concubines for Iceland's founding families. These women were not pioneers chasing dreams of freedom. They were unwilling participants, torn from their homes and forced to bear children for the men who had enslaved them. Their hands built the farms, their labor sustained the settlements, and their wombs gave rise to Icelandic lineages. Yet history remembers them only as wives of the settlers. To the chroniclers, it was fact, not tragedy. But to those women, stripped from Ireland and carried across a merciless sea, it was a life sentence of silence. Their names faded from the record, absorbed into family trees that never spoke of their suffering. They became the unacknowledged foundation of a nation, present at the beginning, erased from memory. Among the settlers mentioned in the Landnámabók was one such woman, Rafgri, an Irish noblewoman captured by a Viking named Ivar Surkfer and forced into marriage amid the harsh, unforgiving landscape of Iceland. Her story was far from unique. Another settler, Ketil the Foolish, established his home at Kirkjubæur. Because he was Christian, no pagan followers would join him. Yet generations later, his descendants intermarried with families whose maternal bloodlines traced back to women once taken by force from Ireland. Through them, the stolen lives of Irish captives quietly shaped the future of Iceland, their blood running in the veins of those who never knew their names. These accounts preserved within the ancient sagas were never mere legends. They were memories rooted in truth. Modern genetic research has now confirmed what those stories only hinted at. DNA studies reveal that while the vast majority of Iceland's founding men carried Norse paternal lines, an astonishing proportion of its earliest women, nearly 63%, traced their maternal ancestry back to Ireland and Scotland. The statistics paint a grim reality. For every chieftain who claimed land and raised his homestead, there were women forced onto ships, carried across the sea into lives they never chose. Their destinies were bound not by love or consent, but by conquest. They were compelled into unions, turned into wives and mothers by necessity, not by will. From their bodies and labor, the first generations of Icelanders were born. The roots of this nation were not planted in freedom but in coercion, uprooted from one world, transplanted into another. These women became the silent architecture of a civilization built upon conquest and captivity. Number 7. The Lady of the Oseberg Ship, 834 AD, Vestfold, Norway. In 1904, archaeologists unearthing a burial mound near Oslo stumbled upon what remains one of the most magnificent Viking discoveries ever made, the Oseberg ship. Preserved in thick blue clay, the vessel emerged almost untouched by time, stretching 21 meters in length and carved entirely from oak. Its prow curved upward like a serpent's neck, swirling with intricate engravings that seemed almost alive. Inside the ship's burial chamber, dated through dendrochronology to the summer of 834, lay artifacts that spoke of extraordinary rank and influence. An elaborately carved wooden cart, 3 ceremonial sledges, finely woven tapestries, beds, chests, and the sacrificed remains of 15 horses and 4 loyal dogs. Resting within were 2 women. The elder, between 70 and 80 years old, bore the unmistakable marks of advanced cancer. Scholars believe she was no ordinary figure, perhaps a queen, a high priestess, or both. The second, roughly 50 years old, was long assumed to be her servant, a devoted attendant who followed her mistress into the afterlife, willingly or otherwise. Yet recent science has rewritten that assumption. Mitochondrial DNA analysis of the younger woman revealed a genetic signature rarely seen in Scandinavia, one more commonly found around the Black Sea and deep into Iran. She was not of Norse blood at all. Her bones told a deeper story. Isotopic testing of her diet showed that for much of her life, she had consumed little protein, typical of distant lands far from the northern seas. But in her later years, her diet suddenly changed to that of the Norse elite. The evidence suggests a haunting truth. She had been taken, perhaps during a raid, a noblewoman uprooted from her homeland and brought to serve the powerful matriarch buried beside her. Though she may have lived in luxury, she remained a possession. And when her mistress died, her own life ended as well. Whether through ritual sacrifice or command, we cannot say. What we can say is that her death was not her own. She was interred not to be honored, but to enhance the grandeur of another. Her body was the final tribute to the woman who owned her, the ultimate display of domination. The splendor of the Oseberg ship was built for the elder. The younger was a token, the proof of ownership even beyond death. Bound, buried, forgotten, yet history does not end there. In 2009, while constructing a relief road for the 2012 Olympic Games in Dorset, England, workers made a chilling discovery. On Ridgeway Hill, they uncovered a mass grave, 54 skeletons piled within a pit, their skulls severed and placed apart. Forensic analysis dated the event to around the year 1000. Isotopic traces within their teeth told a story no saga ever dared to write. These men were Scandinavians, warriors from the frozen frontiers of the far north, some even from beyond the Arctic Circle. They weren't settlers seeking land or traders chasing wealth. They were a captured war band, executed in cold defiance by Anglo-Saxon defenders. A rare moment when the hunted became the hunter's prey, a brief reversal in the age of Viking terror. But such moments were fleeting. Across the ancient records, from the Annals of Ulster to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the story that repeats again and again is one of raids and ruin. Viking ships gliding out of the mist, returning not with gold, but with people, women by the dozens, sometimes by the hundreds. The Ridgeway Hill massacre may show one band's brutal end, but for every downfall like theirs, countless others returned home with captives instead of comrades. Human lives, especially those of women, were the true currency of the Viking Age. They were the unspoken treasure of conquest, the invisible spoils that crossed the seas in silence. Their names were rarely written, their stories erased by time. To chroniclers, they became mere tallies, faceless numbers of the taken. To the Vikings, they were silver in human form, the wealth of the living traded and forgotten. And yet, for history, they remain, unseen, unnamed, but never truly gone. Their silence still lingers beneath the waves and in the soil of old burial grounds, whispering of a truth too heavy for legend to carry. To everyone listening, remember that behind every legend of glory lies a shadow of grief. The past is not just tales of heroes and kings. It's also the story of those who were never allowed to speak. If this story gave you something to think about, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe to Vassal Truths, where forgotten voices rise again, and history's silence is finally broken.